The door sealed behind him with a sound that landed too heavy for its size. Noah Pierce felt it before he understood it, the soft mechanical click that didn't echo, didn't announce itself, but stayed. He paused with his hand still on the handle, mop cart angled awkwardly at his hip, listening for the follow-up sound that never came. No latch release, no delay, no invitation to leave. At 2:14 a.m., the executive floor of Halcyon Dynamics was supposed to be empty. That was the schedule. That was the rule that kept him safe. Empty floors meant no eye contact, no questions, no sudden shifts in tone that made an Omega recalibrate his entire body language in half a second. Tonight, the room wasn't empty. The boardroom lights were dimmed to a city-lit half-glow, glass walls reflecting Manhattan in fragmented lines. Leather, chrome, stillness. And on the far side of the room, stretched across the private sofa like a mirrored image, lay the Calder twins. Rhett Calder on the left, Lucan Calder on the right. Twin alpha CEOs, unmistakable even in repose, suits loosened but not removed, cuffs undone with deliberate symmetry, breathing slow enough to convince someone who didn't know better. They looked asleep. Noah swallowed. He stood there longer than he should have, long enough for his cart to squeak softly as it settled, long enough for his instincts to whisper something unhelpful and dangerous. Power doesn't sleep like that. He hated that thought. Instincts had gotten him in trouble before, had made him notice things that weren't meant to be noticed, so he did what had kept him alive for years. He ignored it. "I'll be quick," he murmured to the room, because apologizing to empty spaces felt safer than thinking too hard about occupied ones. "Won't make a sound." The words came out habit-soft, rehearsed by repetition rather than choice. Noah pushed the cart forward carefully, easing the squeaky wheel over the threshold with his foot. He adjusted the handle twice until the rattle stopped. He always did that. Control what you can. Shrink the rest. On the sofa, neither twin moved. Noah didn't look at them again. That was another rule. You don't look at power unless invited, especially not when it looks like it isn't looking back. He moved to the far end of the table first, where the glass surface held faint fingerprints that only showed under certain angles of light. He sprayed cleaner onto the cloth instead of the table. Another rule, learned the hard way. Sound traveled in rooms like this. So did scent. As he wiped, he catalogued, without meaning to, the way the city hum threaded through the windows, the subtle click of the HVAC system cycling down, the weight of the room pressing inward, as if it were holding its breath. Behind him, breathing continued. Slow. Even. Too even. Noah forced himself to keep moving. He straightened chairs that were already aligned, smoothed a coaster that hadn't been touched. He worked in patterns, small rituals that kept his mind occupied so it wouldn't wander to the sofa behind him and the twin silhouettes reflected faintly in the glass. His cart gave a tiny protest as he shifted tools. "Sorry," he whispered automatically, then winced at himself. Too loud. He paused again, listening. Nothing changed. No reprimand. No movement. No sudden clearing of a throat meant to remind him where he stood in the hierarchy of the room. The silence stretched. Something in his chest loosened, just a fraction. They really are asleep, then. The thought made him feel foolish, and relief followed so quickly it scared him. Relief was careless. Relief was how you forgot yourself. He kept cleaning, but his movements softened, edges rounding off now that his body believed the danger had passed. That was when he started talking. Not loudly. Never loudly. Just enough to fill the space so the quiet wouldn't turn sharp again. "My mom hates hospitals," he murmured as he wiped the edge of the desk. "Says they smell like endings, but the bills keep coming, so I guess one of us has to get used to it." He didn't expect an answer. He never did. "I used to think if I worked hard enough someone would notice," he went on, adjusting a stack of untouched documents. "But turns out noticing takes time people don't want to spend." On the sofa, Rhett Calder's breathing changed, just slightly. A fractional hitch that would have meant nothing to someone who wasn't trained by years of watching for shifts that preceded consequences. Noah didn't see it. Lucan did. Noah moved to the side table, fingers steady, as he lifted a paperweight and cleaned beneath it. His reflection stared back at him from the polished surface, small, contained, shoulders angled inward by habit rather than fear. "Omegas learn early," he said quietly. "If you don't take up space, no one feels the need to push you out of it." Behind closed eyes, the twins listened. This hadn't been part of the test. They had expected deference, or nothing. Omegas usually went silent around perceived authority, folded themselves into efficiency. But Noah Pierce spoke the way people did when they believed they were truly alone, without strategy, without performance. Lucan felt something unfamiliar tighten low in his chest. Rhett noted the cadence, the lack of bitterness, the way the man never once blamed the room, or them, or the company whose name was etched into every surface. He blamed silence. Noah reached the center of the room again, cloth moving in slow circles over the table's surface. He hesitated, then leaned closer, voice dropping even further, almost thoughtful. "Silence keeps you alive," he whispered, "until it doesn't." The words hung there. That was the moment the balance shifted, not with a sound, not with movement, just with the quiet understanding that something had been said that couldn't be taken back. Noah straightened, suddenly aware of his own voice echoing in his head. He glanced toward the sofa at last. Just a quick check, barely a look. Two men, still unmoving, still asleep. He exhaled, embarrassed. "Sorry," he murmured again, and turned back to his cart. He didn't see Rhett's fingers flex against the leather. He didn't see Lucan's jaw tighten. He didn't know that the test had already failed, because power, when it pretends to sleep, is at its most dangerous, and Noah Pierce had just spoken the truth in a room designed to punish that kind of mistake. Noah didn't notice the shift right away. That was the thing about being trained to disappear. You learned to register danger late, if at all. You learned to assume silence meant safety, not scrutiny. So when the room seemed to settle more deeply around him, when the air thickened instead of loosening, he mistook it for calm. He rolled his cart toward the windows, careful with the wheel that squeaked if pushed too fast. He hated that sound. It announced him, made him exist louder than necessary. He slowed. The city outside stretched endlessly, lights stacked on lights, people awake and unaware of how much truth leaked out after midnight. Noah wiped the glass in vertical strokes, the way he always did, counting them under his breath. 1, 2, 3. Patterns helped. Patterns meant control. Behind him, the twins remained still. Noah let himself breathe. When he spoke again, it was quieter than before, less like confession, more like habit, the kind of talking that filled long hours when no one interrupted because no one ever did. "I used to take up more space," he said softly. "Not physically, just mentally. Thought if I showed what I knew, someone would give me a better badge, a desk, a name that meant something." He smiled faintly at his own reflection in the glass. It didn't reach his eyes. "That was before I learned how fast attention turns into trouble." He moved to the credenza, adjusting a framed company award that sat slightly crooked. The irony wasn't lost on him. Excellence etched into glass, accountability nowhere in sight. On the sofa, Lucan Calder focused on the rhythm of Noah's footsteps. Even, careful, as if each step were negotiated in advance with the floor. Rhett listened to the words instead. Noah wiped dust from beneath the frame, then replaced it exactly where it had been. He could have straightened it fully, chosen not to. He didn't. "Omegas aren't taught ambition," he continued, voice still low, still controlled. "We're taught awareness. When to speak, when not to. When to agree so the conversation ends faster." He paused, cloth stilled in his hand. "My mother says that's a kind of intelligence, knowing which fights won't feed you afterward." The words weren't bitter. That was what unsettled Lucan most. They were practical, earned. The tone of someone who had tested every option and chosen survival with open eyes. Noah crouched to wipe the baseboard near the long table, knees protesting quietly. He ignored it. His body had learned to do that too, file pain away until it was inconvenient to acknowledge. "When she got sick," he went on, "I thought maybe, I don't know, someone would see the hours I worked, the things I fixed before they broke." He reached under the table, careful not to bump the chair legs. His sleeve brushed the polished wood, and he froze for half a second, listening. Still nothing. He continued. "Turns out, being useful just makes you easier to overlook." On the sofa, Rhett Calder's breathing slowed even further, not to maintain the illusion of sleep, but because something in Noah's voice demanded stillness. Listening without interruption felt suddenly important, as if any movement would tip the balance of the room. Lucan wondered distantly how many nights this man had spoken into rooms like this one. How many truths had evaporated into polished surfaces and soundproof walls. Noah stood again, flexing his fingers once before picking up the trash bin. It was empty. Of course it was. Executives didn't leave messes. They left consequences. He replaced the liner anyway. That's why I like nights, he said. No expectations, no performances, just work that stays done for a few hours. He hesitated, then added almost thoughtfully, and people say more when they think no one important is listening. That made Lucan's pulse jump. Rhett noticed, too. The sentence was still framed as observation, not accusation, but it carried weight now, retrospective meaning that shifted earlier words into something sharper. Noah rolled the cart back toward the door, checking the floor one last time. He was almost finished. Relief edged in again, unwelcome but persistent. He reached for the door handle. It didn't move. Noah frowned, adjusting his grip. Tried again. Slower. Nothing. A quiet, unpleasant chill crept up his spine. Doors didn't lock like this. Not internally. Not without clearance. He didn't turn around. That would be a mistake. You didn't confront power head-on unless you were prepared for the consequences of being seen. He waited instead. Behind him, the silence shifted. Not broken. Changed. Rhett Calder opened his eyes. Lucan followed a heartbeat later. Neither spoke. They didn't sit up, didn't move. They let Noah feel it first, the difference in the room when authority stopped pretending. Noah swallowed. His reflection in the glass showed it this time. The door might be jammed, he said carefully. Neutral, professional, not an accusation. If I could just... I know, Lucan said. The word cut cleanly through the room. Noah turned. The twins were sitting up now, identical movements, unhurried, eyes sharp and awake. There was no pretense left in their posture, no softness, just attention, complete and unsettling. Noah's instincts screamed belatedly. Rhett stood first, adjusting his cuffs as if this were any other meeting. You're thorough, he said. We noticed. The word noticed landed like a dropped glass. Noah lowered his gaze immediately, shoulders angling inward by reflex. Thank you, sir. I'll wait for facilities to unlock the... How long? Lucan interrupted, voice calm. Have you been listening? The question was wrong, too precise, too sharp. Noah's heart kicked hard against his ribs. He understood then. This hadn't been a mistake. This had been a test, and he had failed it by speaking when he thought no one powerful was awake. The room held its breath. Noah considered his options. How many truths could be told before one of them became fatal? He chose carefully, the way Omegas learned to, long enough to survive. He lifted his eyes, just enough to meet theirs. Long enough, he said quietly, to know when silence stops being protection. The air went still, and somewhere deep in the building, systems shifted, responding to a moment that had already gone too far to undo. Noah didn't step back. That surprised him more than it surprised them. The moment had arrived, the one he'd rehearsed in fragments over years, never expecting it to take this shape. Twin alpha CEOs, locked door, power fully awake. Fear should have folded him inward. Instead, something steadier took hold. Lucan was the first to move closer, slow and deliberate, like approaching an animal that might bolt. You chose your words carefully, he said. That tells me you understand leverage. Noah's fingers curled once at his side, then relaxed. I understand consequences. Rhett circled, not threatening, just present. Then you know why this conversation matters. Yes, Noah replied, and why it should end quickly. That earned a brief glance between the twins, an exchange sharp enough to be a language of its own. Rhett stopped near the desk. You spoke about zoning inspectors, OSHA reports, a death. Noah inhaled, counted. I didn't accuse. I repeated. Details, Lucan said softly, that weren't public. Noah nodded once. That's usually how truth survives, by staying undocumented. Silence stretched, taut as wire. Rhett leaned back against the desk. If you knew all this, why stay? The question landed again, heavier this time. Noah answered without hesitation. Because leaving would have made me visible. Lucan studied him closely now, not as a janitor, not even as an omega, as a variable. You think invisibility keeps you safe? It keeps me alive, Noah corrected. Safety is a luxury. Rhett's mouth tightened, not disagreement, recognition. You record us? Lucan asked. No. The answer came too fast, Rhett noticed. But I record patterns, Noah said. Schedules, access points, backup routines. Who talks louder when they think the room is empty? Lucan's gaze sharpened. That's still evidence. Only if you know how to read it. Rhett straightened. Show us. Noah hesitated. This was the line. Cross it. And there was no returning to quiet survival. He reached into his pocket slowly, deliberately, and placed his phone on the table. Screen dark, unassuming. There's nothing incriminating on that device, he said. Not alone, but it connects to others. Off-site, encrypted. Lucan exhaled once, controlled. Insurance. Yes. Against us? No, Noah said. Against the kind of people who use you as cover. The words hung there. Rhett's eyes narrowed. Explain. Eldon Price, Noah said. Board level, access without oversight. He deletes what he needs, pins the fallout where it sticks, usually downward. Lucan stiffened. The name wasn't new. The implication was, he authorized the after-hours zoning approval, Noah continued. Overrode safety delays. When the scaffolding failed, the report was rewritten before sunrise. Rhett's jaw set. That incident was ruled an accident, Noah finished. I know. Lucan moved to the table, picked up the phone, but didn't unlock it. Why tell us now? Noah met his gaze steadily. Because tonight wasn't random. You pretended to sleep to see who you were when power wasn't watching. Rhett didn't deny it. And because, Noah added, quieter now, Price knows I know. He's been testing exits, deleting redundancies. Lucan's voice dropped. You're saying he's preparing to erase you? Yes. Rhett pushed off the desk. Why not go public? Noah almost laughed. With what? A pattern no one wants to decode? A whisper from an Omega janitor? The room absorbed that. Lucan glanced at Rhett. If he's right? He is, Rhett said. They looked back at Noah together now, not as interrogators, but as men forced to choose between control and complicity. Lucan spoke carefully. If we move, it implicates us. Noah nodded. I know. Rhett's voice was flat. And if we don't? Noah met his eyes. Then I disappear quietly, and the company bleeds slowly, like it has been. The systems hummed around them, indifferent. Lucan reached for the tablet on the table, fingers already moving. Lockdown server access, internal only. Rhett nodded once. I'll call legal, not Price's people. Noah's breath caught before he could stop it. Rhett noticed. You didn't expect that. I expected, Noah said, choosing honesty now that it mattered, to be escorted out. Lucan shook his head slightly. You misjudged the test. Noah swallowed. Then I passed? Rhett didn't answer right away. He looked at the door, then back at Noah. You changed the terms. The alarms didn't sound yet, but somewhere deep in the building, permissions shifted, access revoked, eyes opened, and Noah understood something then, sharp and irreversible. He was no longer invisible, and power had noticed. The first alarm didn't scream. It pulsed, soft, almost polite, like the building was asking permission to panic. Lucan's tablet chimed once. His eyes flicked across the screen, then hardened. He's already inside the system. Rhett exhaled slowly. Timing's too clean. Noah felt it then. The shift, not danger rushing in, but space shrinking. The boardroom no longer felt empty. It felt observed. He anticipated resistance, Noah said. That's how Price works. He moves before anyone realizes they're part of the game. Lucan looked up. You've seen this before. I clean late, Noah replied. I hear what people say when they think walls don't listen. Another pulse from the system. The lights dimmed by a fraction, barely noticeable but intentional. Rhett moved to the control panel near the glass wall. He's locking remote redundancies. If he seals the audit logs, you'll have hours, Noah said. Maybe less. He'll frame it as a breach. Blame an internal asset. Lucan's jaw tightened. You. Yes. The word landed without drama. Noah didn't soften it, didn't beg. He'd already accepted this ending in smaller ways, over years. Rhett turned back to him. You came in tonight knowing this could happen. Noah hesitated, then nodded. I didn't know you'd be awake. Lucan's mouth twitched, not a smile, something closer to regret. Another chime, this one sharper. Lucan spoke into his headset. Isolate Price's credentials, freeze all executive overrides. A pause. Then, yes, now. Noah watched them move, decisive, efficient, dangerous, in a way that finally faced outward. For the first time since he'd been hired, power wasn't pretending to sleep. The intercom crackled. A voice filled the room, smooth and amused. You're acting hastily, gentlemen. Rhett didn't flinch. You shouldn't have accessed the servers, Eldon. Price chuckled. You shouldn't have failed your own test. Noah's stomach dropped. Lucan's eyes cut to him. He knows. Oh, I know everything, Price continued, including your janitor's little archive. Clever boy. Too clever. Noah's fingers curled into his palm. He's been a liability for months, Price said lightly. I assumed you'd dispose of him quietly. Rhett's voice went cold. You assumed wrong. Silence. Then a sigh. You're choosing optics over survival. Lucan stepped closer to Noah, not touching, but close enough that Noah felt the heat of him, a line drawn without words. You used us as cover, Lucan said. That ends tonight. Price laughed softly. You think exposing me won't splash back on you? Rhett glanced at Noah. Truth splashes. Silence drowns. The lights flickered again, stronger this time. Somewhere, systems fought each other. Price's tone sharpened. If that Omega walks out of this room, everything burns. Noah lifted his head. Then let it burn. Rhett turned, surprised, not by the words, but by the steadiness behind them. Lucan spoke into his comms. Initiate full transparency protocol. Release preliminary logs to legal escrow. Price swore. The alarms finally screamed. Sprinklers hissed to life above the server junction, water cascading like sudden rain. Noah took one step back, heart hammering. Rhett grabbed his arm, not restraining, anchoring. Stay. The word held weight. As water soaked into carpet and circuitry, Noah understood the truth of it. This room wasn't testing him anymore. It was choosing sides, and there would be no quiet exit. The sprinklers kept running. Cold water drummed against glass, soaked the carpet, crawled toward the walls like something alive. Somewhere below them, servers screamed as redundancies failed one by one. Lucan shut the main valve with a curse. Rhett was already rerouting power, fingers flying, jaw set. They moved like men used to chaos, like men who had survived storms by becoming one. Noah stood where he was told, stay. He hadn't realized how rare that word was in his life until it was spoken like a promise instead of a command. Price's voice crackled back through the intercom, stripped of amusement now. You're overplaying this, he snapped. One janitor isn't worth burning a company. Noah flinched, despite himself. Rhett didn't look at him. You burned it first. Lucan glanced over his shoulder, eyes sharp. Noah, how much does he know about your files? All of them, Noah answered quietly. He intercepted my backup 6 months ago. Let me think it was safe so he could map who I'd told. Rhett stilled. Which was? Noah swallowed. No one. The room went silent. Lucan turned fully then. Not angry, something worse, understanding. You carried this alone. I didn't have a choice. Price laughed bitterly. You always have a choice. He chose to be useful instead of obedient. Noah's shoulders tightened. Old instincts screamed at him to shrink, to apologize for existing in the wrong place again. Instead, he lifted his chin. I chose to survive. The words surprised even him. Lucan nodded once. Rhett's mouth curved, not kind, but approving. Good, Rhett said. Then we'll do this properly. He tapped a final command. The wall screen flared to life, flooding the room with data, emails, transactions, shell accounts branching like veins. Price's architecture, Price's rot. Lucan spoke into his headset again. Loop compliance, audit, and legal. Timestamp everything. If he wipes one server, 10 mirrors go live. Price's breathing came through the speakers now, harsh. You think this ends clean? No, Lucan said. We think it ends true. Noah felt something shift inside him, fear loosening its grip, replaced by a dangerous, unfamiliar heat. Not dominance, not safety, visibility. The intercom clicked off. For a moment, the only sound was dripping water. Rhett turned to Noah then, really looked at him. When did you start recording? Noah hesitated, then answered honestly. The first time I heard someone cry in this building after midnight. Lucan exhaled slowly. You could have sold this, Rhett said. Disappeared. I thought about it, Noah admitted. Every night. And? Noah met his gaze. I wanted someone to stand with me, just once. The room held its breath. Lucan stepped closer, not crowding, not claiming. Then stand here. Noah did, not behind them. Between them. Somewhere deep in the building, security doors began unlocking, manually overridden. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Help was coming. So was fallout. Noah realized, with a strange calm, that he would never be invisible again, and power, once seen, never forgets the face of the one who survived it. The door handle turned. The door opened to uniforms and clipped voices, the smell of wet carpet and overheated circuits rushing out into the hall. Security first, internal, trusted, hand-picked. Rhett didn't relax. Neither did Lucan. Noah felt it immediately, the shift. The way eyes lingered a second too long, the way his name moved through the room without anyone saying it. Witnesses always became risks before they became people. Contain the floor, Lucan ordered. No devices in or out. A guard nodded and reached instinctively for Noah's wrist. Rhett moved before the hand landed. Don't, he said, quiet and final. The guard froze. Noah swallowed. Old reflexes flared. Don't make it worse. Don't be noticed. Don't cost them anything. He forced himself to stay still, to breathe, to remember where he stood, between them. Compliance arrived next, then legal, then a woman Noah had never seen before who didn't look at anyone's face, only hands, exits, shadows. Price's name spread like oil. Arrest warrants were already forming, external agencies looped in, the machine of accountability grinding awake, loud and unforgiving, and still, no one spoke to Noah. He was escorted to a chair near the wall, not restrained, not reassured, parked. Lucan noticed. His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Not yet. Rhett leaned down briefly. This part gets ugly, he murmured. Stay with us. Noah nodded, though his pulse was climbing again. He had lived too long inside systems to trust their mercy. Hours passed. Dawn bled pale through the glass walls of the executive floor. News alerts began lighting screens. Names leaked, numbers spiked, Halcyon Dynamics was trending. So was Price. Finally, the woman with the sharp eyes approached Noah. You recorded illegally, she said flatly. You accessed systems without authorization. Noah didn't argue. I know. You could be charged. I know. Lucan turned. He saved this company. She didn't look at him. He endangered it. Rhett stepped in. He exposed it. The woman studied Noah then, not with judgment, but calculation. Why didn't you come forward sooner? The room went quiet. Noah's throat tightened. He thought of termination notices slid under doors, of Omegas escorted out by security for asking the wrong questions, of how truth worked when power decided it was inconvenient. Because I wanted to live, he said. Silence held. The woman straightened. That may not be enough. She walked away. Lucan exhaled slowly, like someone bracing for impact. They're going to try to cut him loose. Rhett's expression hardened. Then we won't let them. Noah looked up sharply. You don't have to. We do, Rhett said. Because if we don't, we're Price, with better branding. Another alert chimed. Price had gone dark. Accounts frozen, locations unknown. Not arrested. Gone. The room shifted again, fear curling back into the edges. Lucan met Noah's eyes. If Price disappears, the narrative changes. Rhett finished the thought. And witnesses don't survive narratives. Somewhere deep in the building, an elevator chimed. Coming up, unscheduled. Noah's phone, confiscated hours ago, buzzed once on the table. A single incoming message flashed before the screen went black. You should have stayed quiet. Stayed. Noah didn't tell them about the message, not because he wanted to protect the twins, but because he recognized the tactic. Fear worked best when it felt private. When it convinced you that survival meant shrinking again. He wouldn't. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor with a soft chime that felt too polite for what followed. Two men stepped out. Not security, not legal, bored. They wore calm like armor. Rhett's shoulders squared. Lucan's expression went cold in a way Noah recognized, power preparing to close ranks. Gentlemen, one of the board members said smoothly, you've made quite a mess overnight. Lucan didn't respond. The man's gaze slid past them and landed on Noah, lingering, measuring, dismissing. And this is the janitor. Noah felt the old heat rise in his chest, shame trained into instinct. He forced it down. I'm a witness, he said evenly. A pause. Rhett turned his head slightly, just enough for Noah to see approval flicker there. Witnesses don't dictate outcomes, the second board member replied. They're managed. Lucan stepped forward. He's under our protection. The first man smiled. That's not how this works. The room tightened. Noah understood then what Price had always known. Systems didn't fear corruption. They feared disruption. And Noah was disruption breathing. We can contain this, the board member continued. Blame Price alone, distance the company, terminate the source. Terminate. The word wasn't meant to be literal. That almost made it worse. Rhett's voice cut in, sharp. No! Silence snapped into place. Lucan didn't look at him. If he falls, we fall with him. The board members stared, recalculating. Twins willing to burn themselves were an unexpected variable. Noah felt something dangerous bloom behind his ribs. Not hope, resolve. He stepped forward before anyone could stop him. I'll testify, he said. Publicly, independently. I've already mirrored the files externally. Lucan's head snapped toward him. You did what? I learned from watching you, Noah said softly. Never rely on a single system. The board members stiffened. Rhett exhaled, slow, controlled. You didn't tell us. I needed leverage that wasn't yours, Noah replied, in case you chose the company over me. A beat passed. Rhett met his eyes. We didn't. And Noah believed him. The board members withdrew then, not defeated but delayed. Power rarely surrendered outright. It waited. As they left, Lucan turned to Noah, voice low. From this point on, you don't stand between us. Rhett completed it. You stand with us. Sirens echoed faintly below. Press vans were already gathering. Noah felt the weight of it settle fully now. There was no going back to invisibility. And somewhere in the city, a man who hated witnesses was watching, planning what it would cost to erase one who refused to disappear. The first threat arrived disguised as courtesy. A black town car idled at the curb as Noah exited the building, its windows tinted too dark for city code. The driver stepped out, suit immaculate, smile practiced. He addressed Rhett and Lucan by name, offered a destination, a conversation, a way to smooth the damage before it calcified. Lucan didn't slow. Rhett didn't acknowledge him. No, Rhett said, flat and final. The driver's smile thinned. It would be a shame if this escalated. It already has, Noah said quietly. The driver finally looked at him, really looked. The assessment was quick, dismissive, dangerous. You're making powerful enemies. Noah met his gaze. They already existed. I just stopped pretending they didn't. The car pulled away without another word. Inside, the building shifted into siege mode. Legal teams arrived. Phones rang without pause. Emails multiplied like spores. Statements were drafted, revised, gutted. Every sentence weighed for liability, for tone, for who it protected. Rhett paced once, then stopped. They'll try to isolate you. Lucan nodded. They'll say you're compromised, emotional, unreliable. Noah folded his hands to keep them from shaking. They'll say I'm an omega. Lucan's jaw tightened. They'll say whatever makes you small. The first article dropped before dawn. It framed Price as a rogue actor, praised swift leadership, questioned the credibility of an unnamed custodial employee. The comment sections burned. Half believed it, half didn't. The rest watched, waiting to see who would bleed. By morning, Noah's name leaked. His phone vibrated until the battery died. Old co-workers, unknown numbers, a message from the hospital billing department reminding him of an overdue balance, a voicemail that started polite and ended with a threat wrapped in concern. Rhett stood between Noah and the glass as cameras gathered below. "We can move you." "No," Noah said. "If I disappear, they win." Lucan studied him, then nodded once. "Then we don't disappear either." They went public together. The press conference was controlled chaos. Questions fired like rounds. Rhett answered with precision. Lucan dismantled deflections without raising his voice. When Noah stepped forward, the room changed. Not louder, quieter. "I cleaned your floors," he said. "I emptied your trash. I listened because no one thought I mattered." A ripple moved through the crowd. "I didn't collect evidence to destroy a company," Noah continued. "I collected it to survive. When silence protects abuse, speaking becomes self-defense." A reporter asked if he was being used. Noah glanced at the twins. They didn't interrupt, didn't rescue. They waited. "No," he said. "I chose this." That night, the retaliation sharpened. A lawsuit, a smear thread, a cease and desist that read like a warning shot. Noah's apartment lock was jimmied, nothing taken, just moved. A reminder that privacy was conditional. He didn't sleep. At 3:07 a.m., Lucan found him in the office kitchen, staring at a cup of untouched coffee. "You should rest." Noah shook his head. "If I sleep, I'll dream small again." Lucan leaned against the counter. "You don't have to be brave every minute." "I do," Noah said, "because they count on fatigue." Rhett joined them, jacket draped over his arm. "We traced the smear. Shell accounts, same architecture Price used." Noah exhaled. "He's not done." "No," Rhett agreed. "Neither are we." Outside, rain slicked the streets, turning headlights into streaks. Somewhere in the dark, leverage shifted hands again. By morning, the cost of being seen would rise, and Noah would have to decide how much of himself he was willing to spend to keep the truth alive. The hearing room smelled like old wood and recycled air. Noah sat at the narrow table with a glass of water he hadn't touched, hands folded, spine straight. Across from him, the panel shuffled papers, adjusted microphones, avoided his eyes. They had read his statements, they had reviewed the files. Still, they hesitated. Truth was expensive when spoken aloud. Rhett and Lucan sat behind him, not flanking, not looming. Present, visible, refusing to let the room pretend Noah stood alone. The first question came gently, too gently. "Mr. Pierce," the chair said, "why didn't you report these irregularities sooner?" Noah didn't rush his answer. He had learned the cost of filling silence too quickly. "Because every system I was taught to trust," he said, "required me to prove my worth before it would protect me. And by the time an Omega proves that, it's usually too late." A murmur rippled. Another panelist leaned forward. "So you're saying fear delayed justice?" "No," Noah replied. "I'm saying fear preserved my life long enough for justice to have a chance." The room went still. Outside, the city waited, markets twitching, headlines drafting themselves in advance. Inside, something quieter shifted. The narrative they had prepared no longer fit cleanly. Hours later, when it was over, Noah stepped into the hallway and felt the aftershock hit. His knees weakened, his vision blurred. Rhett caught his elbow without comment. Lucan handed him his coat. "You did well," Lucan said. Noah shook his head. "I did what I had to." That was when the message came. Not a threat, not a warning. A single line, sent from an unknown number. "You don't disappear like the others." Noah's breath caught. Rhett read it. His expression hardened. "He's watching." Lucan looked down the corridor, already calculating exits. "And he's adapting." They escorted Noah out through a side door into late afternoon light. Cameras shouted questions. Noah didn't answer, not because he was afraid, but because he understood something now. Noise wasn't power. Persistence was. That evening, alone in his apartment, Noah stood by the window and watched the city breathe. He thought about the nights he cleaned in silence, about the whisper that changed everything, about how being seen didn't erase fear, it sharpened it into purpose. His phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't Price. It was an internal memo leaked anonymously, confirming a second investigation. Broader, deeper. Names Noah didn't recognize yet, but would. The truth was spreading without him pushing. Noah closed his eyes. Somewhere, powerful men were realizing that pretending not to see had consequences. And somewhere else, others were deciding whether to speak while they still could. He set his phone down and whispered to the empty room. Not in fear, not in secrecy, but in resolve. I'm still here. And for the first time in his life, the silence answered back. If the quietest witness refuses to vanish, how many more truths are already waiting to be heard?